You've heard AM, you've heard FM. Now, tune into DMRadio, the world's longest running show about data. Each week, host Eric Kavanaugh interviews the brightest minds in the world of information management. Want to be on the show? Send an email to info@dmradio.biz. Now, here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again to the longest running show in the world about data. It's called DM Radio. Yes, indeed, yours truly, Eric Kavanaugh here. Very excited today to talk about, frankly, the new frontier in business, folks. We're going to talk about the industrial cloud and the hottest new job out there, the cloud architect. We're going to talk about what that means. We got a couple great guests lined up for you today. Mike Gibbs is the CEO of Go Cloud Careers. Look these folks up online. If you're looking for something new and exciting to do or take your career to the next level, that's what they focus on. And Don Boxley is with us from DH2I as well. He knows a thing or two about networking and moving workloads around. So we're going to talk about how to do that effectively. And I'll just give you some opening statements here, folks. The cloud architect, in my opinion, is the new hot job. It is going to be these folks who carve out the future business models that run our economy. If you look at all the innovation that's happening in these different cloud environments, well, it takes a lot of work to understand the AWS versus Azure versus GCP. Oracle Cloud is very serious these days. Lots of other companies are getting into the mix, but really understanding the nuances, which are better for which workloads, whatever your criteria may be, whether it's cost or security or extensibility or durability or whatever, you can weave together these remarkably powerful infrastructures now that will give you an advantage. Because in the web-enabled world, it's all about performance, folks. It's about being able to get the right data it's at the right time to the right person, have the right algorithms in the background, optimizing things, understanding who the customer is, who the partner is, what does this moment mean to our business. The more you architect the infrastructure to be as robust or as agile as you want, the better off you're going to be. And to start us off, let's bring in Mike Gibbs from Go Cloud Careers. Mike, tell us a bit about yourself and how you're helping folks foray into this brave new world of industrial cloud.
Sure, absolutely. And thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today. I've been here before and I love coming on your show. I'm going to tell you that what I do is I train cloud architects. And I've been an architect now for about 25 years. I was a network architect, an enterprise architect, and a cloud architect. And I completely agree with you that the cloud architect is the world's best job for the future. The reason the cloud architect is such a good job is as architects, we're a cross between business executives and engineers, in that we start with the customer and we ask the customer about their business goals, their business pain points, their business challenges. We look at their financial statements, we look at the balance sheets, we look at what industry analysts are telling us to really learn that business. And then we go and baseline the company's current technology. We evaluate what people do, their workflows, and then we craft a solution to improve that business. Who knows what it might be? It could be something to increase sales, increase collaborations, getting experts to talk to each other, new customer journeys. It really doesn't matter. But our goal is digital transformation. And because of this, we train a person with basically MBA knowledge in business acumen, leadership, etc. Marry that with expertise and the knowledge of the network and the data center, because all the cloud is a network and a data center that's been virtualized. And then we create an expert of taking things from the old tech to the new tech, which is new iteration of the old tech. And wow, we've got speed changes. So for example, things that would take us 6 weeks in the data center, like ordering a new server, take 6 seconds on the cloud. Right. So we've got speed and agility and almost unlimited capacity of the cloud, which is fantastic. It's quick to set up. In some cases, it's cheaper, not always, but in a lot of cases, it's a little cheaper. But the agility of the cloud is amazing. It's super transformational. So cloud architects are digital transformation specialists. And I've been focusing on digital transformation now for 25 years. Granted, when I was at Cisco for a decade as a lead architect, we focused on the network, but not really. We sold the network, but we focused on the end-to-end design. What is the journey of the doctor in the hospital? And how, for example, does the technology impact them? What does a nurse do? What does a financial advisor do? What does a trader do? How do we make them better in their everyday life? That's the job of the cloud architect. Many people confuse it with engineering, Let me code this, let me configure this, let me do this. That's not our world. We are digital transformation specialists, and I love it. And I've been doing this for 30 years now, and I have a global academy. And I will tell you that every single day I've got a student that gets a cloud architect job. Every single day.
Wow.
There's not a day that goes by where one of my students doesn't get this job. And you know what? Some of them worked in tech, and you know what? A lot of them didn't. I had a food server get hired by Amazon about a month ago. I had a geologist get hired by Amazon a couple of weeks ago. And that's what I do, and that's what I love. I teach people how to be the world's best architects, teach them how to interview, teach them how to write like an architect, present like an architect, sell like an architect, how to deal with ROI, RFPs, RFQs, the whole gamut, the executive training and the tech training. And that's why we do what we do. And that's why our clients are super successful.
I love it. And, as I think about this role, I love to create things, whether it's works of art. I'm a writer. I've been a writer for a long time in the content game here, creating stuff. When you build something, there's a special feeling you have for it. It's really quite compelling when you know that you constructed this and you see it work. It's like, it's that desire to create that I think is in all human beings one way or another. And what's so exciting about this role, it's not new, but it's evolving, and it's evolved enough to where we can call it a new role. Yeah. I think is that these folks are going to be carving out new business models. So you take someone who is an expert, let's say in the food industry world. Well, guess what? There's a lot of experience that person has in logistics and supply chain and customer relationship management, all these things. You learn these skills. Now you can take that to the next level and work with a distributor, for example, or work with an analytics company that's trying to best optimize supply chains. I mean, there are so many things you can do. And I see it's the cloud architect who's the person who will understand what's possible and then map out the framework to build this next iteration, this next business model. That's really fun stuff, right?
It is fun stuff. And you spelled it out completely. That's exactly what we do. And the reality is, in our world, people are confused on this, and I don't know why. And the reason they're confused on it is there's a certification that's called solution architect, which doesn't teach architecture at all. It teaches the name of a service and how to configure it. Right. And what happens is people assume they're going to get some certification and then they're going to get an architect job, and they don't, because the architect is that digital transformation specialist. So I think that's the key, is knowing what that architect job is and studying for that job for the people that want to get these careers. And that's what we do.
Yeah. And if you go into, let's say, even a medium-sized company, or you talked about some big companies like Amazon, anywhere you go, there are going to be environments where things are working a certain way, right? Digital transformation is all about changing that, right? Changing it significantly is what you want to do. You want to optimize it. You want to collapse cycle times. You want to remove unnecessary components of processes in the workflow, for example. And there are so many ways you can do that. And when people realize how you can leverage these various engines, that's what they are. They're just huge engines out there that you can cobble together workflows to do what you want to do, whether it's in healthcare, financial services, retail, food industry, whatever. There are going to be opportunities. And I believe it's the cloud architect who will come to the fore as the solution provider or the solution designer. Right? The information architect is what we've called these folks in the past, but the cloud architect takes it one step further and really bakes in that infrastructure component, which now can be software defined, right?
Yes, in many cases. We've got a lot of the network that's software defined. Our virtual machines, well, granted, they're sort of semi-software defined because of the hypervisors and the way they work. Our containers are somewhat software defined. We've gone from physical load balancers to software load balancers. We've gone from physical storage to storage area networks to basically the same storage. So yeah, you're there. And it's really right. We've gone from basically the physical data center and network to the virtual network in the data center. But it's all about the workflow. And the reason I say workflow, I was an architect and architecting healthcare environments and spaces too for about a decade when I worked at Cisco. And customers used to say, what tech should I buy? And I'd say, it's never about the tech. What do your nurses do? What do your doctors do, and how? And I would go to units and I would follow the nurses around, and I would follow the doctors around. I would follow the registration people around. And only then could I come up with a solution. Heck, I worked with one customer and found out that the nurses were working back and forth. They were spending 2 hours a day just going to an ice machine. We got the customer a new ice machine, and they saved a few $100 million a year in overtime. And it sounds that silly, but it's what it takes. But the reason I go back to workflow is in medicine, we as in the US government, mandated that healthcare organizations adopt electronic health records. Now, the majority of the healthcare companies that made these records never hired any medical professionals. So we went from paper records to digital records that were designed by engineers and not medical professionals. Prior to medical electronic health records in the US, medical errors were the 5th leading cause of death. And after the US government said, you must use electronic health records,
Jeez.
medical errors became the 3rd leading cause of death.
Wow.
So that's a really bad response. And it's not that the tech was bad. The routers were good, the switches were good, the servers were good, but the tech did not optimize the workflow. Nobody asked the doctor, what do you do in your day? Nobody asked the nurse, what do you do in your day? Nobody asked how they work. And the tech systems made the doctors rearrange their whole workday for the tech, which caused them not to have any time with their patients and all their time spending note taking.
Right.
So that's the key for architects. We got to know the way that people work, and that's why it's so critical.
You know, I remember when some of the bigger legislation came around regulating the healthcare industry. This is probably 7 or 8 years ago, maybe. And some of the stories I heard were just bone chilling. I mean, I heard a story about a hospital, a pretty big hospital in the Midwest somewhere that was trying to get these new systems up and running. It just wasn't working properly. And so what they would do is they kept their old paper-based system up in the ceiling of the rooms, like where the people were. Like when the client would left, they'd just like go up into the ceiling, pull out the paperwork, mic down what happened, and put it back up there so that the auditors wouldn't find it. And you're like, what on earth is going on here? But the point that you're making, I think, is that if you approach this intelligently and thoughtfully, and you have a cloud architect as a key person in the conversation, then you can avoid those sorts of really dire consequences that will occur otherwise, which again are very significant. And there's talk about a business case. I mean, that's a pretty strong business case to take cause of death of 3 down to 5 and then down to 10, hopefully.
Yeah.
For medical errors. I mean, goodness gracious. So the key is get that person into the game, give them a team to work with, and then start designing some more robust solutions, right?
Absolutely. But get people in the industry. Those cloud architects need to be experts on too. You know, a cloud architect like me that also used to practice medicine is perfect for creating solutions for healthcare customers.
Right.
Likewise, we've got someone that used to work in banking. Now we train them to be a cloud architect. Wow, what can they do for the financial industry?
Right.
Because they know the work. They know exactly what to optimize.
Well, and that's the key, right? And this is why you also want to keep people around in organizations. It's painful, especially for key personnel to leave, because then training someone is hard and you just lose the head knowledge of the person who was there. So designing solutions that capture what is necessary to go through the processes, that's the key, right? Because no one wants to do documentation. We see across industries now, a lot of the technologies are sort of baking in that documentation process, which I think is fantastic. You saw that in data warehousing with companies like Warescape and some others. We're seeing other places too. So that's good because it kind of solves for a challenge that people don't want to do, but is really important to know what were the steps you took to get here, right?
Absolutely.
But again, I think the key is that, to your point, you get someone who knows the business or is familiar with the business, train that person to better understand the possibilities. And then it's a full-time job staying on top of what the big guys are doing. AWS, we talked about how Oracle bought Cerner right before the show. We talked about that. I mean, these are major developments that have serious impact on your decision-making if you're paying attention, right, Mike?
Absolutely. And especially the Cerner one with Oracle one, that's a special one because I love the cloud. And I'm going to make that very clear. I've been designing systems on the cloud and I'm going to make that clear. And I love Linux and I'm going to make that clear. But in the early days of Linux, and I remember using Linux, you know, you had a firewall, IP tables, and it wasn't great, but it was the best you had on it. And then you had a word processor, which wasn't great, but it was the best you had. And then you had something to edit videos on your Ubuntu or Red Hat box that was work, but it wasn't good. It was never the same as the industrial apps. And a lot of the cloud apps are just that. They're really things that are just sort of like, they're better than the basic thing that would be out there free on Linux, but they're not robust like the kind of firewalls that a Palo Alto would make or a Cisco would make. You can't compare an AWS WAF to a Cisco firewall or a Palo Alto firewall. But with Oracle, like you're describing, they bought Cerner. At one point, Cerner had 1,300 clinicians working for them, doctors and nurses, to make their medical apps useful for doctors and nurses. 1,300 of them. And wow. I know when I remember meeting with their CEO and COO and CTO and CIO many years ago, because we were building a clinic with them at Cisco. And they were on and they knew the industry as well as any of us. I could practice medicine. My manager, Jeff Wright, at the time could practice medicine. And when we spoke to them, we went, wow, they had it. So now that
Great.
Oracle knows them, if somebody was going to get a healthcare solution on the Oracle cloud, they have hundreds, if not thousands of doctors that can consult the customer on how to do it. So now they're not an engineer trying to pretend they know how to practice medicine and doctor workflows. They have doctors doing it and nurses doing it and physical therapists and pharmacists. So wow, that's a cloud provider that can really deliver a healthcare solution because they're a healthcare company and a cloud company, as opposed to like the Linux freeware, like, hey, we've got a service for you. It's our tune on a standard service, but buy our stuff and it's not proprietary. And oh, by the way, you've used our proprietary service as your handcuff. You can't get off of me or do multi-cloud easily.
Right.
So when I see Cerner, that stuff, and Oracle, that's an exciting digital transformation for them.
Well, and two, I'm glad you mentioned workflow a couple times here, because an experienced professional in a particular industry is going to be very familiar with the kinds of workflows that are necessary for the nurses, for the doctors, for the admins, for all the people who are involved in this process. And the people who then also know the information systems, what information we can grab from where and when and so forth, and how to navigate through the regulatory constraints and so forth. That person is going to be able to figure out how you can streamline it. I use the word collapse these processes. Instead of having, let's say, 5 steps, you have 2 steps because you wove 3 of them into the first step and 2 into the second step. There are ways you can do that through data integration, through application integration, things of this nature, to get snappy and get it rolling quickly. Because if it doesn't work quickly, people go around it. I often call that the black market effect. If you put too many rules in place, people are just going to go around them, and you're going to get shadow IT, you're going to get shadow programs, shadow processes, and that's not good for auditing, and it's probably not good for health either. What do you think? Real quick, 1 minute.
You know, it's interesting. Years ago, we tried to overly secure things, and everybody had sticky notes. You need 50-letter passwords. Okay, now everybody's storing their passwords on there. So the point is, we need things that work and are robust, but they have to be user-friendly. Because if they get in the way of our workflow and they get in the way of our ability to do our job, I promise you, we will make things that will enable us to do our workflow, but it may not be in the best interest of the company.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, this is where shadow IT comes from, folks. And I'm a fan of shadow IT. I know what happens. The business has to get something done. In larger organizations, you're trying to navigate through this process that is just painful. I mean, I often think that the whole data warehouse appliance just reality occurred because the data warehouse became such a political construct. It was so hard to get your data in there, to get your data out of there, to get someone to pay attention to you. So folks were like, you know what, let's buy this Netezza box and do it our darn selves. And that's what they did. And then you've got all kind of issues of trying to reconcile that data. So yeah, shadow IT is good sometimes, not so good in the long run. Folks, don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. You're listening to DM Radio.
Welcome back to DM Radio. Here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
All right, folks, back here on DM Radio, talking all things industrial cloud. We heard from Mike Gibbs of Go Cloud Careers in the opening segment. He'll come back for the roundtables. And next up, we have Don Boxley of a company called DH2I. I've known Don for a few years now, doing some really interesting stuff out there in Colorado. Don, tell us a bit about what you're working on and how you're enabling the industrial cloud.
Yeah, thanks for, again, having us back on the show. Yeah, I think in the first segment, we just talked about in generally, what it was and cloud architects and how they can move forward to making it successful for customers. Our business is really, would be a help to cloud architects, helping them to figure out how they can connect, different clouds basically together. So we've got a solution that's around software-defined perimeter, which is an emerging new technology that's really designed to replace the VPN. When you think about a VPN, and this is how we kind of frame it with our customers, the VPN, when it was originally designed back in the 60s, really was about, just connecting, users to resources that are on premise. And we describe it as being like if you think about a castle and a moat, right? So if you think about the castle and the moat, if you're trying to get into the castle, you have to, basically give a password, and then, whoever's running the gate, the bridge lowers the bridge, you go into the castle and you're good to go. Once you're in the castle, pretty much you can do anything you want, right? So you can roam around the castle. unfettered. That's similar to a VPN, right? I've created an environment. I give you a slice of my network. You've got a password, some authentication, but once you're into the VPN, into my network via VPN, you can go anywhere you want to. We call that a lateral, attack surface that I've created for you. And if you go back, and I think pretty confidently, if you go back and look at all the major data breaks that have happened over the last 10 years, but they're really, it's very simple, right? Somebody's credentials were compromised, right? Somebody was giving access to the castle, and because they could roam around the castle, then they create an opportunity for them to do damage. It may be that, I was supposed to go to the kitchen, but I ended up going to the armory, right? And hanging out there for a while. So with our solution, really what we're trying to do is help customers, you got to have connections, right? I mean, we talked about this, right? The virtualness of the world, you got to be able to connect people, resources together virtually. How do you do that the most secure way without compromising and putting too many roadblocks, in the way of making that happen? And that's what software-defined perimeter does, right? It allows you to connect resources together so that in the case, again, going back to this analogy around the castle, instead of you having the ability to roam the castle, I've only given you access to the kitchen. And that's the only place you can go, and you can't get out of the kitchen. So even if you want to destroy my kitchen, the harm that you can do to me is limited to the kitchen. There's no way for you to laterally, right, survey the rest of the castle. You don't know what's there. You don't know how big it is. You have no concept of, what's beyond the kitchen. So that's the idea around software-defined perimeter.
Yeah, could you go into some detail on how you pull that off? So are you basically carving out areas of the network where someone is allowed to go? How do you program that? How do you enforce it? How do you monitor it?
Yeah. So it's real simple, right? So in case of like a multi-cloud for, a number of our customers are, using a multi-cloud environment, they've got a server in Amazon, they got a server in Azure, they load our software on. And what our software does is it allows them to create a secure tunnel between both of the devices. And each of them has to have a key, if you will, right, to authenticate against each other. But once they've been authenticated, right, they basically tell each other where we're at, right? So I know you're at this particular address, in the internet, and so at that point I can talk directly to you. But it's even more detailed than that, right? It's really designed around specific applications that can talk to each other. So a lot of our customers use our solution for around SQL Server, right? And with SQL Server, right, people are accessing those databases. And so SQL Server likes to talk on a specific port. So what our software does is it redirects that default port to a port that nobody knows about, but only the two computers that want to talk to each other know about. And then they're able to talk to each other transparently. So at a high level, that's how it works. It's very secure. It's proven to be, pretty effective for connecting devices together. So the use cases, multi-cloud is a classic, right? Because I want to be able to put things, in Amazon and Azure or Google. How do I do that, right? Traditionally, it might be a VPN, but we know that doesn't work effectively. So that's where software-defined perimeter would come into place. Site to the cloud, again, another use case that's very popular with us. And an emerging one is around IoT, right? You've got a lot of these devices floating around the internet that people want to use. They're, in oil and gas, they're, medical, right? Just a device that I need to have it talk to a cloud hub to dump data, right? I think, Mike, as you were, in a hospital, right? You got all these devices, they're all doing all kinds of things. They're collecting all kinds of data. How do I get that data to a central place so that the doctors and, clinicians can analyze it and make decisions? You could use a VPN to kind of try to connect all those devices through a VPN, but that's a nightmare, right? So, but with software-defined perimeter, I can create these secure connections between those devices to that hub. And then you've got, up-to-date data that then can be analyzed and actioned on. So
You know, what's interesting too is in this world of information systems, you'll have certain technologies that don't change for a long time. I mean, there may be incremental improvements to them, but revolutionary change seems to take a long time. Like VPN is a perfect example. It's been around a long, long time, hasn't changed too much. I think about ODBC and JDBC as ways to access data. Those are not brand spanking new protocols. That's old stuff. It was built in a past generation. We're now seeing a lot of innovation in that space for being able to ingest data, process data, distribute data, all sorts of different things. But it's interesting here in the networking space, again, in the cloud networking space, I think it's going to be a really big deal to find these new ways to build out these robust architectures that, again, leverage what's best of each environment. And yes, that's a moving target, but if you understand what your business is and where you really need to harden certain parts of your processes, that's where the cloud architect really comes in and can save the day, I think. What do you think, Don?
No, you're absolutely right, and I think that's it. And the classes that Mike has got, I think they're key to that, right? In helping exposing those and training those cloud architects so they can understand, what's the breadth of things that are available to them, so they can, deliver the right solutions for their customers. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure if there's necessarily more permutations, fewer permutations, but the on-prem world had all sorts of challenges, and I for one think that the rumors of the on-prem data centers demise have been greatly exaggerated. I don't think a lot of these guys are going away anytime soon.
No.
Right? At least 7 years, because you got to amortize all that stuff, right? So it's at least a 7-year window. It's probably it's forever, and we're gonna the more you can leverage what you have where it is, which is what we're really talking about these days, the more you don't have to worry about like moving stuff around and doing all those traditional things that are very time intensive, that are very risky, that are very expensive, right? So the more we can leverage what we have where it is. You see this with data gravity, for example. Don't move all this data over here and move it back over here. My goodness, we did so much of that stuff last on Monday. We did ETL to ELT and beyond. So we know about those challenges, but in this networking space, that's a really, really big deal as well. What do you think, Don?
No, it absolutely is. And that's where I think, this whole, again, emerging idea around software-defined perimeter makes that really, really possible, right? Because as you say, you've got these data gravities, right? These bodies of data, right? They're just too hard to move. They're just too expensive. But the issue is, how do I get to that data securely? How do I get to it, with performance? And that's where I think, we've seen with our customers, we've got one fintech customer, for example, competing against the other, larger fintech companies, but, their entire application runs in the cloud. And, they're using us to, again, to secure their data. They got data running, in South America, and I got data running in Europe. And so they want to make, they've got issues around, right, data, they've got data laws that actually prevent data from moving from, out of Europe to South America, vice versa. But they need to be able to take advantage of that data. And so instead of using a VPN to form that connection or a direct connect, using, direct lines, which are super expensive and difficult to, maintain, they use us. Right, they use that software-defined perimeter solution. They connect those servers, and they, their users get access, their analysts get access to data in both buckets. So no, it's only going to get more. It's only going to get, it's more prevalent, right? And we see more of our customers, just going to your topic about the data center. Most of our customers, truthfully, they're still in the early stages of figuring out, okay, how do I take advantage of the cloud? Because my entire model has been built around on-premise. But they understand, as Mike was communicating earlier, that, I can provision, servers in seconds. It takes me weeks to get one on-premise, right? So how do I do that? Because my business is changing. It is. It's just a fact. So they're stuck with, okay, how do we do this, right? How do I do this without compromising, the overall health security capabilities of my business? And this is where you need the technologies, we think, like software-defined perimeter, to help you, make those connections, build things up without, exposing yourself to a lot of bad actors, right? That are looking for opportunities to, get inside your systems and do bad things.
Sure. And, there's another theory I have, and I'll float this by you, gentlemen. We'll pick this up in the roundtable next as well. But I think Mike even talked about the trade-offs, and we may get more into that, of this approach versus that approach. If you want more security, you have less agility, for example, or vice versa. I think that going forward, we're getting close to a space where you don't have to make such hard decisions if you design the architecture properly or in an optimal fashion. In other words, you can improve agility and still not lose your security. I think that's the direction that we're going. But again, it's a complex space, and the more legacy technology you have, I think the more challenging it's going to be. But going forward, what do you think about that theory?
No, I think it's absolutely right. I mean, we've gone out and surveyed our customers and the broader community over the last couple of years, just looking at VPN usage. And the last year when we surveyed everybody, right, you would expect, right, VPNs, was very prevalent. You could tell, we know that Cisco was the number one VPN, leader in that space. What they're using for. When we went back this year, we said, okay, what are you doing, with the pandemic? Because this was pre-pandemic. What's happening with your environment? And we didn't see much change in terms of the VPN usage, in terms of the number of customers that were adding VPNs. I think a lot of the customers were, expanding the footprint and how much, usage their VPNs were using. But we didn't see, new customers buying VPNs. What we did see, though, is this idea of software-defined perimeter starting to take hold, right? The customers are trying to understand, okay, there might be a better way for me to manage this new world, right? Because I'm really concerned about the security issues around my VPN. So, how can I leverage this new tech, right, and integrate it in a way that doesn't disrupt, right, the existing VPN footprint that I have? Because that's the reality, right? Customers already have VPNs, they've paid them, Cisco's given them away, they're there, right? So now the customer's got to deal with, okay, if I want to bring in a new technology, how do I do that, right, in a way that I get the best bang for my buck, right? Because I can't rip all that stuff out. It just doesn't make sense, right? It just doesn't make sense. So yeah, we think it's going to just take time. Like, it's just going to take a long time, but eventually, right, the VPNs are going to, I think, come down, and things around like software-defined perimeter, software-defined networking, they're going to continue to increase and take over that space because of the flexibility they offer customers, right? I mean, and I can get my performance, I can get my security, right? And I can make it adapted to whatever infrastructure I want to kind of cobble together, right? Multi-cloud, on-premise to cloud, it doesn't matter, right? As long as I can have connection, I can see things on the internet, I can use these technologies to connect my resources, my people, right, my programs to make me, to make the business run.
Yeah, and real quick, you mentioned something that really struck me as interesting, that to get new technologies into your organization in a traditional data center, especially if you're in fintech or if you're in healthcare or these heavily regulated industries, it is such a challenge to get to dot all the I's, cross all the T's, appease all the security people in line who are looking at your information, deciding, so that the better you can prepare yourself for that contingency, the easier it's going to be to bring in the new technologies like data science platforms, for example. We have a bunch of those folks we've worked with over the years, and they tell us that just, people love the technology, they love the platform, they want to buy it today, but they have a whole list of checklists they have to get through, people they have to appease, and that is just not an easy thing to do. It takes time. It's a political construct, so now you have to deal with all these people, and some person who doesn't like you and is going to find some way to scuttle your idea. What do they say in sales? You want to remove as many objections as you can, right? Prepare for the objections, have an answer for them when they come around. This is the kind of thing you can do, folks, to prepare yourself. What's that famous quote? It actually goes back to, I think, some Greek hero who said that luck is when opportunity meets preparation, right? So I love that one. But folks, don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. You're listening to DM Radio.
Welcome back to DM Radio. Here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
All right, folks, welcome back once again to DM Radio. We're talking to two cloud experts today, Don Boxley of DH2I and Mike Gibbs of Go Cloud Careers. And speaking of careers, Mike, let's talk about, how do you get hired? right? Lots of folks are looking for new employment now. We heard about a service industry person getting a job as a cloud architect. What's some advice you can give to anyone listening to the show? Where to go? Obviously, to go check out your classes, but general advice on how to get hired today. Go, Mike.
Absolutely. And you know what, Eric? It's been 20 years that I've been helping people get their first jobs now. So it's
That's
something
cool.
that I love to talk about. And I now have a global academy where I get someone a job every single day of the week. So what I will tell you is when it comes to getting your first job or transitioning careers, especially when you're taking a job where they normally want years of experience, but that's okay. We know how to cheat that experience to get people hired anyway. First, it's an issue of knowing exactly what the job is and knowing what the hiring manager wants. Now, we have asked probably 15,000 hiring managers and recruiters over the years, what's your perfect employee? And they all tell us this: someone that can do the job, someone that doesn't lie to them, someone that knows what they know and knows what they don't know so they don't make a mistake, someone that's energetic, enthusiastic, and passionate about the work, someone that brings about the best in others, which means their emotional intelligence, someone that's willing to go above and beyond, and someone that's a team player. So that's what the employers want. And our secret is making sure that our candidates are exactly what the employers want. So we train their emotional intelligence, we train their communication skills, we train them in deep technical acumen, we train them how to answer questions that they don't know, and how to control the interview on their terms to show their strengths and highlight their weaknesses and minimize the impact of their weaknesses. So there's that. But what else goes with it? What is the cloud? Well, it's a network and a data center. And how is everybody else trying to learn the cloud? They're trying to learn the name of the services and how to configure them. But we're architects, so we don't configure anything. We design things. So the key, the secret to becoming a great cloud architect is to learn the legacy technologies, the network and the data center technologies. Because all we do as architects is move the stuff from the network and the data center to the cloud, which is nothing more than a virtualized network and a data center. And by doing it this way, our architects have good, strong fundamentals. And it means that they also know every cloud. Because if a server is a virtualized server, if it's a VMware ESXi system, a KVM VM, a QEMU VM, an Azure virtual machine, an EC2 instance on AWS, or a compute engine instance on Google, they're identical. And by learning these initial skills, our students learn every cloud. So effectively, we're teaching the cloud instead of any cloud, kind of like learning how to drive versus learning how to drive a Mercedes and then a Honda and a Toyota. And by doing it this way, our students there. We also place a massive impact on business acumen training.
That's really good stuff. And I'll throw this one over to Don. I think another exciting development here is that I think we're starting to see, let's call it mitigation of the business IT divide, because that was a chasm forever and a day between people in the data center who control the applications, whatever gets bought, whatever gets deployed, whatever gets managed, all that stuff that was their domain. And now with the cloud, it's a little bit of a different story, right? I mean, you don't have to worry as much. The gatekeepers aren't as significant. You still do have issues around cost and cost management and so forth, but it's a lot easier to fast track some new service, some new application. The key then, of course, becomes the security, the performance, all these issues. That's what the cloud architect should know. What do you think, Don Boxley?
No, that's exactly right. I mean, that's what our customers are, right, that we see, every day. Right, is that as they roll out new things, the cloud becomes it becomes a great kind of an equalizer, right? That because it removes the I don't know, I guess you call it the domain, but the mystery behind the raised floor, right? In the old days, right? You walk in, you got the raised floor, you got all these servers, you walk in, you got all the air conditioning. It's all like, wow, this is pretty, pretty impressive, right? But with the cloud, it's like, no, you log in, anybody logs, you get in your servers and, and it's just like, boom, you got all these servers, and now you just got to make sure, that they're actually doing what you want them to do. So you're exactly right. I think that it gets business people now maybe dangerous, right? Because it's so easy, right? That, hey, I can put this together. We can do this, right? And you pretty much, you can get into it. And then you realize, well, I really do need, a little more expertise and making all this work together. And I think that's where, the cloud architect really can help you to avoid those traps, right? Of not getting too far ahead of yourself, even though it's really easy, it still requires some, some expertise to just make sure you're optimizing, you're actually doing it right. So
No, that's right.
Right. I think it all works, right? Is most things, right? A strength can become a weakness,
Right.
If it's not, if you don't understand it.
Sure. And I'll throw this one over to Mike too. It seems to me that you want problem solvers, right? If someone who wants a good challenge and gets excited about solving that challenge, that's who you want for your cloud architects, right?
You need a problem solver, but you really need someone with good business acumen, because if our whole goal is transforming a business, if somebody doesn't have that business knowledge, how do I impact sales? How do I impact productivity? How do I impact quality? How do I impact workflow? They won't going to be there. So you need a creative problem solver, but what you really need is an executive. Nobody buys technology because they want it. It's an expense, and you need that. And when you go from the data center, which performs real well, to the cloud, which performs not as well, we need the architect that knows how to work around the weaknesses of the cloud. On the data center, we have storage in our systems. In the cloud, we've got block storage, which is really slow. For example, I can buy a hard drive, a Samsung 980 Pro at Best Buy for $100, and it'll give me 1 million IOPS. I go to AWS and I get an IO1 EBS volume. It's got 64K as opposed to 1 million. And I need to put 15 of them in RAID 0 to equal the performance of my $100 Best Buy drive.
Wow.
Which is why if you go to American Airlines, for example, and you go to the website and it's spinning, we see a lot of really bad database and website performance on the cloud for these reasons. Now, if you've got a cloud architect that knows how to architect it, wow, that cloud's fast. It's ubiquitous. It's there everywhere. But it really takes, really knowing, because the cloud providers, it's a cloud. They're cloudy about it. They don't tell you how their stuff works. They just tell you how to configure it. So because they don't give you the performance information or throughput or anything on it, you're kind of architecting in the dark. That's why it's a cloud. A cloud, as you know, well, it's not like, hey, the stuff that we don't know what it is. So we know what it is. It's a network and a data center. So the real key for us is knowing the strengths of the cloud, the weaknesses of the cloud, how to architect for the cloud. For example, security. I care about security. Now, normally, we just put some firewalls up and we're good to go. In the cloud, I can't go rack and stack firewalls. So what do? Well, I can use the cloud native security, which isn't enterprise grade, or I could go to Cisco. Now, I can't put a Cisco firewall there or a Palo Alto firewall. I've got a virtual appliance in the cloud, which now means I need to load balance virtual appliances to deal if I want real security. So the cloud adds a lot of simplicity in some cases, and a lot of complexity when you need the cloud to work like a traditional environment. So that's the complexity. How do we get the remote access users in? And we can do it very securely, but it gets real complex. Or we can do it very simple. What do we do for the WAN? Because nothing performs as well as a direct connection or a private line. But wait, software-defined networking almost does, and it's a lot cheaper. And it's got some security integrated at the same time. So, I've never get involved on something where I'm not dealing with 100 gig WAN connections on direct connections or multiple 10 gigs. And for me, a VPN is, when you've got 10 internet service providers and you use it as a backup in case your primary links go down, but I'm not working on normal customers. So the kind of stuff that I work with, you've got to know all the complexity. And that's the secret for the architect. Know the strength of the data center, because some things are best in the data center.
Right. That's right.
If you need sub-nanosecond latency, don't stick that on the cloud, because the WAN is going to be more than that. Right. If you need extreme disk performance, don't stick that on the cloud. What if you had some GPU-based machine learning appliance that runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year? Well, that's going to be a lot cheaper to go to NVIDIA and buy a couple of servers for $100,000 each than it's going to be to pay $100,000 a month for 10 servers on the cloud every month forever. But at the same time, what if you only have to do machine learning 10% of the time? Wow, it's so much cheaper on the cloud. Or if you've got workflows that you use part of the time, it's so much cheaper to use it on the cloud. So it's really about that architect marrying the knowledge of what is the customer trying to achieve. What is the tech on the cloud? Should it go cloud? Great. Should it go multi-cloud? Great. Should it go hybrid cloud, multi-cloud? Great. Should it stay in the data center? Great. And build an OpenStack or a Nutanix cloud. It's really, it takes that kind of real knowledge to really be good at it.
Yeah, that's a great description. And, I'm just thinking to myself, this is why the cloud architect is so important. Someone who understands the workflow, right? Think business process management and swim lanes and all this stuff that we've had for decades, or actually a lot longer than that, thousands of years. We've had processes for building pyramids. They had processes, right? So they knew what they were doing back then. It's how they got it done. So if you understand the workflows and the processes, and then you have the vision to understand how you can optimize that, that's where you're really going to get bang for your buck with a cloud architect who can save you time, money, headaches, most importantly, improve morale in the organization. I think that's the most important thing, is improving morale. Podcast bonus segment is up next. You've been listening to DM Radio.